The Republican U-turn on deficits, paying for campus protests, and binge-watching North Korean TV. Two Baltimore City police officers were found guilty of racketeering and racketeering conspiracy in federal court today, according to the Baltimore Sun. They were part of an elite unit called the Gun Trace Task Force, which was supposed to trace illegal guns. But instead, prosecutors argued, the officers in the unit ran the equivalent of a street gang, stealing money and dealing drugs. 6 members of the task force had already pleaded guilty to an array of crimes. And public defenders worry the officers have tainted upwards of 2,000 criminal convictions. Today, New York's Attorney General Eric Schneiderman spelled out the state's civil rights lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein, his brother, and the Weinstein Company. He said they found pervasive sexual harassment, intimidation, discrimination, and abuse.
They knew what was happening. It was flagrant. It was flamboyant. They knew how pervasive it was, and not only did they fail to stop it, they enabled it and covered it up.
The suit, filed last night, complicates the sale of the company, which was supposed to be finalized yesterday. Weinstein has denied allegations of non-consensual sex, and the company's board said many of the allegations made against them were inaccurate. Oxfam's deputy chief executive has resigned after accusations that the charity covered up sexual misconduct by a regional director and other employees in Haiti who allegedly exploited earthquake victims for sex. Penny Lawrence, who's stepping down, said she's ashamed of what happened on her watch. Last week, the Times of London reported that Oxfam leaders tried to quiet an internal investigation into the misconduct claims. A report that followed accused the same regional director, who resigned in 2011, of hiring sex workers in Chad. The charity denies a cover-up, but called the behavior unacceptable. The allegations could jeopardize millions in funding it receives from the British government. Iraq's head of planning said today that the country needs more than $88 billion to rebuild, now that it's wrapped up the brutal fight against the Islamic State. In 2014, ISIS seized control of Mosul, the country's second-largest city, and other areas of the country's north and west. Iraqi forces recaptured Mosul last July, but they essentially destroyed the city in the process. The UN says that roughly 40,000 homes need to be rebuilt there. Puerto Rico's Electric Power Authority says most people have their electricity back after a blackout yesterday. An explosion and a fire at an electric substation in San Juan left several municipalities in the dark. Officials haven't said how many customers don't have their power back on after that incident. It's just the latest setback for the island, where more than 400,000 utilities customers still don't have electricity, 4.5 months after Hurricane Maria. The Trump administration released its latest vision for the federal budget today. The 150-plus page document isn't expected to become law, but it does represent a blueprint of what the president cares about. The priorities outlined here include cuts to some generally popular things, including Medicaid, food stamps, and, unsurprisingly, a proposal to repeal and replace Obamacare. Cuts to domestic spending, though, are pretty common in GOP budgets, as is the increase in military spending that the president proposes. Where Trump and his allies in Congress are breaking with Republican tradition is that they've abandoned trying to balance the budget.
Last week, the Republican-controlled Congress passed a massive 2-year budget deal that included huge increases to defense spending and also non-defense spending. The bill flew in the face of just about everything Republicans say they're against when it comes to spending.
Is agreed to.
It's predicted to expand the deficit to about $1.2 trillion, meaning it's buying a lot of things the government will have to borrow money to pay for. Republicans supposedly hate that kind of thing. And yet in the House, 167 of them voted yes. Only 67 of them voted no. In the Senate, 34 voted yes, and only 16 voted no. Weird, right? Senator Rand Paul is one of those few Republicans who did vote no. He made everybody know how pissed off he was by using Senate procedure to keep them from voting for a few hours so he could yell at them.
The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency or intellectual honesty.
What annoys Paul and the budget hawks is that Republicans seem to only care about deficit spending when Democrats are in power. When it's their own guys, they give them a pass. Ronald Reagan ended his term with a $1.4 trillion deficit. George W. Bush left office with a $3.3 trillion deficit. Republicans ran Congress for many of those W years and gladly voted that deficit into law. Barack Obama also ran a huge deficit, $7.3 trillion. But unhappy Republicans put up a fight then and tried to turn a 2011 procedural vote into a showdown over deficits. They demanded a balanced budget amendment in return.
Our Democrat colleagues still are not serious about cutting spending. That is the issue.
Last week, Senator Mike Lee of Utah also voted no on the deficit expanding budget deal. He still wants a balanced budget amendment, but these days, his Republican colleagues are not planning to use threats to get one from the current president.
I really don't understand the disparity. I really don't grasp why it is that it's okay to vote for this now that there is a Republican president when the same legislation a few years ago would have been deemed anathema to the Republican cause.
Lee told me this is going to keep happening. Republicans are going to keep voting for deficit spending when they have a Republican in the White House. But he says sooner or later, Republicans are going to have to vote like him.
I believe that this is an inevitability that we get to that place. The question is how long it takes us to get there. Sooner or later, the laws of mathematics will catch up to us, and we'll have to do it that way. But it would be a lot better for the American people if we did it sooner rather than later.
Five people were arrested in Seattle on Saturday at the University of Washington as supporters of a right-wing speaker fought with protesters. The hosts of the event, the college Republicans, had won a big victory in court the day before, when a judge ruled that, for now, the university couldn't force the club to pay for security fees. That meant the school had to pick up the $17,000 tab for an event it surely wished it didn't have to host at all.
Why is Bernie Sanders a socialist and most of you support him? You know who was also a socialist? Hitler.
Hundreds of people showed up to protest and support Speaker Joey Gibson, founder of the group Patriot Prayer. He's a fixture on the right-wing speaking circuit whose talks often lead to confrontation.
We are living in a country right now where being American triggers so many people. Okay?
Chevy Swanson is in charge of the group that invited him.
We're a student group and we do have a right to free expression. And then when you say we need to pay this amount of money, not because of you, not because of who you're inviting, but because of how other people might hear it and get mad, that doesn't make sense. We're not inciting violence. So I don't think it's our responsibility to pay for protesters.
This isn't the first round in this fight. Last January, the college Republicans invited Milo Yiannopoulos to speak. Protests engulfed the event.
They saw him! They saw him!
One person was shot, and security cost the school about $20,000, more than $9,000 of which the school charged to the college Republicans. Schools around the country are trying to figure out how to deal with the problem. UC Berkeley says controversial speakers cost the school almost $5 million last year. That's roughly equivalent to 27 professors' salaries. Schools have also had to pay hefty sums for appearances by alt-right leader Richard Spencer, who likes to invite himself to appear at public universities. Texas A&M had to pay $60,000 for a Spencer appearance in 2016, and the University of Florida had to pay $600,000 when he spoke last October.
This is an academic institution for free thought and inquiry.
So it makes sense that the University of Washington would try to charge student groups for security. It just might not be legal. The college Republicans claimed the $17,000 fee was in fact an illegitimate means of shutting the event down, a prohibition on their right to assemble, by giving in to something called the heckler's veto. A judge agreed with them. Bill Becker represented the college Republicans in court.
And it's called the heckler's veto because If you're familiar with what hecklers do at nightclubs, their goal is to try to shut up the comedian. So protesters who engage in the heckler's veto are well aware of what they're doing. It's their purpose to shut down speech they hate.
UW's college police said the violence on campus last year helped them to calculate the costs of securing this year's event. But Becker says that was an arbitrary standard, and that campus officials should have been clearer about how they reached their number. Education law expert Peter Lake says he expects a lot more lawsuits like this one, and that it's not clear whether students or colleges have the more persuasive argument.
Well, you know, the law in this area, free speech on campus, is evolving, and I think colleges are going to argue that they're the ones being subject to a heckler's veto by having to pay lots of money to provide security. I think there's more legal action to come, but this is what we're going to be seeing more of as we wait for guidance from the Supreme Court.
Last week, Representative Lamar Smith, the chairman for the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, called a meeting to discuss defunding the World Health Organization's International Agency for Cancer Research. The reason for this call to action? The world's most used herbicide, Roundup, and its active ingredient, glyphosate. Around 13.5 billion pounds of herbicides containing glyphosate have been applied worldwide over the last decade. Globally, glyphosate use has risen almost 15-fold since 1996, when the pesticide giant Monsanto created Roundup Ready, or glyphosate-tolerant crops. Now, herbicides like Roundup are part of a $27 billion market. But all that growth didn't go unchecked. In 2015, the WHO's International Agency on Cancer Research concluded that glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. The outcry from industry, most notably Monsanto, has been especially loud. Here it is from them.
Their conclusion is an opinion. They do no testing. They simply select data which they wish to review. Scientific data and test information that was favorable was omitted.
Representative Smith and Monsanto point out that the WHO's Cancer Research Agency reached different conclusions from the US EPA and even other agencies within the WHO itself. Those agencies found that glyphosate is safe, but it's complicated. The difference comes down to the data evaluated and the type of assessment. The WHO's Cancer Research Agency did a hazard assessment, whereas most contradicting studies were risk assessments. According to the WHO's Cancer Research Agency, glyphosate falls in the same category as red meat, burning wood in home fireplaces, and night shifts. All are hazards, meaning that they can pose a danger. But because of the conditions under which humans may encounter them, they aren't always bad for us. But there may be something else going on here. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici had this to say.
It is really part of a broader pattern of Republicans on the Science Committee sort of taking positions siding with industry. There was information revealed in the hearing and in documents submitted that, for example, Monsanto they weren't even allowed into the European discussion. They're trying to improperly influence the scientific research and federal policies, and that's completely unacceptable.
A Monsanto spokesperson says they're just defending the scientific evidence that glyphosate is safe. But Aaron Blair, who headed the glyphosate review for the WHO's Cancer Research Agency, agrees with Bonamici.
This is a perfectly credible process, and it has worked well for many other things that were also contentious. Tobacco, alcohol, asbestos, benzene, arsenic. Every single one of these were contentious in the early stages. But that's okay, because that's the way science is. You make a decision, you gather more information, you reevaluate it, and that's what will be going on with this substance.
The most prominent face of the Palestinian resistance right now isn't a politician or a militant. It's a 17-year-old girl named Ahed Tamimi. In a video that went viral in December, she and her cousin kick and slap 2 Israeli soldiers near their home in the West Bank. Tomorrow, she'll face assault and incitement charges in an Israeli military court. To Palestinians, Tamimi is a modern-day Joan of Arc. Israelis see her as a pawn in a Palestinian propaganda scheme.
كل عام وأنت بخير صديقتي عاد.
Tamimi spent her 17th birthday in prison awaiting trial. Her family, which has a history of activism, threw a party for her in absentia.
I am worried because she's in the hands of my enemy. I'm scared. I'm proud that she became the icon of the face of Palestine, the symbol of her generation.
Tamimi has told the courts that she believed the soldier she hit had shot her cousin point blank in the head with a rubber-coated bullet.
ما شفتش الجندي اللي كان تحتي اللي هو طخخني في وجهي.
But her father says that she didn't need any specific provocation.
All around us is a reason to slap all the soldiers. They occupied all our lands. Their normal react against this occupation is to resist. I think she was very kind with this soldier.
Tamimi's protests have drawn attention before. At age 11, she was photographed shaking her fist at Israeli troops. A year later, she was filmed biting a soldier who was trying to detain her brother for throwing rocks. These actions read as intentional and criminal provocation to שולי מועלם, a member of the Knesset.
אני חושבת שיש פה משפחה שהיא פועלת בכל אפשרות שיש לה כדי לקעקע את היותם של חיילי צה"ל אנשים תואר נשק עם תואר מידות. אנחנו מבינים שלפעמים הם עושים את זה גם כשהמציאות לא כזאתי. רוב הזמן הם מנסים ליצור עימותים מול חיילי צה"ל כדי לקבל את מה שהם רוצים.
It's not clear yet how much jail time Tamimi could face, but she's been brought up on 12 separate charges, including aggravated assault. And according to the UN, Israel's military court has a conviction rate of nearly 100%.
The occupation destroyed her childhood and controlled her futures.
While the world watches North Korea compete in the Olympics, North Koreans are mostly watching state media. But it's not all just drab agitprop. Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, was passionate about filmmaking and believed in the power of the cinema to unite his country. His movies were big military dramas, and they had messages of duty to the leader embedded in nearly every frame. The state was never wrong, and its leader never made mistakes.
최고사령관 김정일 동지께서는 사랑과 배려를 안겨주셨습니다.
Kim Jong-un, by contrast, loves the small screen. Under his rule, state media has moved away from the communist epic and into more intimate family dramas that air every night between 8 and 10 p.m. After that, the power goes out in Pyongyang. To understand more about what North Koreans are watching and what the government wants them to think, we arranged a screening with Jean Lee. She's an expert in contemporary North Korean television, something she picked up while working as a journalist in Pyongyang.
Because this is a country that has so many rules, and if you disobey the rules or break them, the consequences are really dire.
Is there a consensus in North Korea then that when you watch a television show that this is a model for how you're supposed to behave?
I think North Koreans understand that they need to watch these to look for those clues, but these lessons in how to be a good citizen are wrapped up in these really entertaining dramas.
The first show we watched was a primetime sitcom called Our Neighbors that takes place in one of Pyongyang's newest high-rises. It's kind of like a communist Friends. Everyone's in everyone else's business, and they mostly hang around an elevator, which is a relatively rare thing in North Korea. At the end of the second episode, the neighbors rush home to watch and celebrate a rocket launch on the news.
is an amazing scene because we've had a couple of years of a lot of provocations, right? And this one, so this would have been in December 2012 when they launched this long-range rocket, and they call it a satellite, but it's really a test of ballistic missile technology. We see from that exchange how closely they pay attention to the news, and then we get to see that the propagandists are like, you need to treat this like a party. You need to get up and dance and sing and celebrate.
One of the things I noticed there was that there was a power outage.
아니, 저 아파트는 왔는데 우리만 핵정전이야.
Is any acknowledgement or the acknowledgement at all that there might be problems like a power outage? I mean, is that common in North Korean television?
I wouldn't say it's common, so that's why this is so unusual. And this is something we've seen with Kim Jong-un. He would be really critical, and he would call people out for mistakes that they've made. And now we're starting to see that reflected in the dramas, acknowledging where things fall short, and then giving people the tools to overcome it.
대전부 친구들 우리 운전공만 알아줘서 정말 겁단 말이에요.
In Sunset in the North, the manager of a mine is confronted with a choice between the old ways of doing business and the new order.
이곳이 바로 봉대지련소와 꽃 같은 온화한 나라의 습식지련소인데 여기서도 이미 낡은 곳으로 인정된 배서손해법을 그대로 도입한 결과 이렇게 실패하고 말았습니다.
I love that the woman is the one who's the most knowledgeable here.
Better than like watching a lot of American films. It's mostly aimed at people who still feel stuck between Kim Jong-un and his father.
North Korea actually has massive amounts of mineral. They're sitting on a gold mine, literally, of minerals, but they don't know how to extract it.
There seemed to be this conflict between like old smelting techniques, I think it was, and wet smelting, which is the new smelting, and that seemed to stand in for a larger cultural issue. Like, is that true?
It shows the frustration, I think, that the leadership has, or the leader has with people's unwillingness to think outside the box. And perhaps that was the way they were under Kim Jong-il. And now he's like, listen, this is a problem. You need to take risks in order for us to move forward. This is kind of a way of saying, listen, in order for us to get to that point where we have a success, we need to make some mistakes along the way. Don't be afraid of it.
Kim Jong-un is also a big sports fan who believes in its unifying and nationalistic power. In the series Small Playground of a Primary School, a member of North Korea's internationally successful women's soccer team moves to a small village to coach an elementary school. You gotta get that one. That's on the keeper. One of the only times I think people actually see North Koreans on any sort of stages during the Olympics. Like, how important has that sort of worldwide exposure been to Kim Jong-un?
North Korea is under so many sanctions and isolated in so many ways, but sports is one arena where they can still compete and be exposed to the rest of the world. So he really sees the potential for sports diplomacy. We're seeing him take advantage of that now with the Olympics in South Korea.
We watched like a combination of like Dangerous Minds and Bad News Bears. It seemed very familiar to me. A young teacher comes in and teaches kids new ways and they go on to win things.
Yeah, they're like a motley group of misfits that she brings together. Yeah, it's a very familiar theme.
What is the state trying to say with this?
This has been a huge part of Kim Jong-un's campaign. Sports are seen as one way to bring your country glory.
All propaganda has a meta layer. The state is always, in a way, talking to the state. Jean believes Kim Jong-un's work on the small screen might be his way to differentiate himself from his father and show his vision forward.
So he's really been trying to convince the people that, hey, I'm watching out for your quality of life. You're going to have more fashion, you're going to have cell phones, you're going to have a lot of computers, TVs, tons of food, which is something that we see throughout TV dramas, even though they have a chronic food shortage. It's propaganda after all. And also the other thing that's really noticeable is the demographic. The stars are much younger. He's a young guy. I mean, Kim Jong-un is only in his 30s. And if he's going to rule for decades, he's got to win the loyalty of that younger generation.
I'm Gloria Allred. I'm an attorney, and I deal with facts and with the law. Unlike certain people on the internet who just make up stuff. This is Vicepedia. Let me put any rumors to rest. The suit that I am wearing is not a hand-me-down from Marge Simpson. I don't buy Chanel. Instead of buying a suit, I would prefer to invest in a lawsuit. Gloria Allred is a media hound. I make no apologies. I'm very proud of all of the courageous clients that I have represented. Name calling will never stop them either, because the status quo is completely unacceptable. So folks, if that's all you've got, I'm sorry, but you're losing this battle. Yes, I have been accused of being powerful, but I have never been accused of being sexy or having anything to do with sex. So thank you very much for the compliment. This was part of the propaganda that was put on the internet by supporters of Roy Moore. The signature of Roy Moore in the yearbook has been examined by an expert, and this expert believes that that was Roy Moore's signature.
So definitely not yours.
That is Roy Moore's signature in the yearbook. Donald Trump said in 2012 that Gloria Allred would be, quote, very, very impressed, end quote, with his penis. Mr. Trump, I don't have a magnifying glass strong enough to see something that small. I just went to the worst McDonald's and they gave me nearly burnt chicken tenders. I'm calling the police and my lawyer, Gloria Allred. I will say this, no one has ever accused me of being a chicken.
Can you tell us what this press conference was about?
No. Vicepedia.
That's Vice News Tonight for Monday, February 12th.